Hey, gun people. Well, I've been following this case, and I've got a playlist for Houston PD if you want to go back and get on the search warrant where they lied. I mean, I've done quite a few, I don't know if it's hours, but at least probably a couple hours of videos on this. These two cops, this is probably the most egregious case I've ever seen in my time where cops have just literally falsified a warrant to go in and shoot and kill two people. So the FBI finally got involved, and they end up charging a woman also involved in the case. And Gerald Goines is the officer that they allowed to retire. He's retired now after they came up with charges. He was shot in a raid. 4 other Houston cops were shot in a raid. And Gerald Goines is the guy that wrote the warrant. He's the one that swore on the affidavit that there were drugs in the house and they had guns. This is going to be a very interesting case. I'm going to scroll down to, and when this first came out, the chief supported the cops and said, oh, they didn't do anything wrong. And if you remember, the little weasel that worked for their union came out and said, we're tired of having targets. We're tired of making it sound like the poor cops, 4 cops were shot and it wasn't their fault and they're out there serving the public. When in fact, a cop was lying on a search warrant, making up false information, bringing dope to set someone up. And I still haven't heard any connection on why he did it. But, and I don't know if that'll come out. This is Goines, the guy who wrote the warrant, who lied, I think 30 years or 20-something years on the Houston PD. This is Bryant, the guy that 2 days after the raid, he ended up writing an affidavit saying he saw the brown heroin that was bought from the house by the CI. Now, I'll give this guy some credit. Maybe Goines showed him some dope and said, hey, this is what we bought from the house. So he wrote a supplement saying, yeah, I saw the dope that was bought from the house. That may be his defense. I don't know. It's not clear yet. But here's a little recap.
Officers, and what else are Gerald Goines and Stephen Bryant accused of doing? Investigative reporter Jeremy Rogowski takes a closer look.
Gerald Goines was a 32-year Houston police veteran, a member of HPD's Narcotics Squad 15, and the case agent who led the raid.
Okay, so by saying he led the raid, he was the lead agent, so that means he wrote the warrant, and usually whoever writes a warrant is the case agent, because he knows the most about the case. So he's the one that's going to brief. You know, if I was a case agent and I wanted SWAT to do a high-risk entry, I would say, hey, man, I need SWAT to assist on this call. SWAT would just show up to the briefing. I would brief the warrant to my guys who were going in there searching, what they were looking for, who our key players were. Here's what we're looking for. Here's what the case is a little bit. Give them a little bit of drawdown. And then they know the players. I'd probably give them a picture of anybody that we wanted to arrest. We'd get any pictures of witnesses. I'd have their criminal history. That's what the case agent does before a raid or a warrant is served. So, and then if I was going to use a SWAT team, if we really thought that the team was, or the SWAT team says, hey man, we're working today and we haven't done a lot of raids and we need to justify, you guys got any warrants you want us to make entry on? We'd be like, all right, man, I'll use a SWAT team on this warrant. So then the SWAT team would come to my briefing and I would give them the same information. They would see the warrant. They would make sure the warrant, they had a copy of the signed warrant, etc., since they were going to breach entry on that. And then we would brief them. They would do the entry. Once they gained entry secured, then my team and my guys would go ahead and follow. Sometimes if they only had a few SWAT guys, we would kind of jump in a Congo line and we would make entry with them. We might be 4 or 5 and they would be 1, 2, and 3 or something like that. But that's when he says case agent, that's what the case agent does. That means it was his investigation. He knew the players. He was working a CI. He's the one that has everything going on this. Everybody is acting on what he says.
Ramming the door of the Harding Street home. Here is the original search warrant affidavit Goines wrote that prosecutors now say was full of lies. He claimed a confidential informant had bought heroin from the home the day before the raid, and that fellow Squad 15 officer Stephen Bryant recognized the substance as boy, street slang for heroin. After the raid went south with 4 officers shot and 2 homeowners killed, Chief Art Acevedo stood by the story he knew at the time.
We actually bought black tar heroin at that location.
That dude's a weasel. Man, I don't like him at all, but he's just a company line guy. He's going to repeat whatever he's told to repeat. So, I mean, was he involved in a conspiracy? No. But he's still at the top, and a buck stops with him, and he's got crappy people with all these stars standing around him not doing their jobs to let a detective out there run crazy, make up warrants, do false warrants, bring it in front of a DA and a judge, get it signed, get the SWAT team, get no-knock warrant authorized so they can just kick the door, flashbang, and start shooting up the place. So he's saying he's all innocent, he didn't know, but you know what? That's the problem with government. They always, when they get caught being incompetent, they blame the lowest guy. They never look in the mirror.
But no heroin was ever found, court records show, and neither was the supposed informant who bought it.
Goines later admitted, one, there was no confidential informant who purchased drugs at 7815 Harding Street.
That's the DA. She was doing his press release, and in my other videos, I think I have, if not all of her press release, the key points. This is a really key point, because if he later admitted there was no informant, then he just made the case because he swore in front of a judge under oath that the warrant that he just made was true and correct under penalty of perjury. So the judge issued that warrant in good faith that he was telling the truth. When he lies, man, he just loses all kind of protections and immunities and everything. So the fact that he admitted there was no confidential informant, and then we have a signed warrant where he signed saying, I witnessed a confidential informant that worked for me, that I gave money, that went in there and bought dope, and then he gave me the dope when he left, and these people are selling dope from this house, and I need the SWAT team to go in, no knock, and seize this house because they're armed. Man, that's why this case is so egregious to me. I've never seen a case where a cop was this dirty doing this with a warrant, providing false information of the DA and the warrant, and swearing that all this is, and swearing that it's so stupid, because how are you going to produce a confidential informant to say you bought drugs when you don't have witnesses? Who signed the money? How did you document the money? Where was the evidence? Why didn't you book the evidence? I mean, there's just so many ways to prove that you're lying. And to do this, I mean, this guy needs to hang, and he's facing life, and he ought to get life.
According to District Attorney Kim Ogg, Officer Stephen Bryant also was in on the lies when he wrote this supplemental report 2 days after the raid. In it, Bryant claimed he observed a plastic bag containing 2 small packets of a brown.
Okay, so he's saying he observed this, but when did he observe it? On the morning of 1:30. Is that 2 days later? I'm not real sure on the time frame. If this is 2 days later, this may not be a lie. He could have actually observed 2 small packets. Goines could have showed him, and that's probably going to be his defense. Another officer showed me the dope and said, hey, this is what we got from the house, and I saw it. So he's facing, I think, 20 years for obstruction because it's a federal charge. So we'll see how that goes.
Powdery substance, heroin, that was bought from the Harding Street home.
Bryant's claims were false.
District Attorney Ogg called the charges against both officers action number 1 in a sweeping review of thousands of cases worked up by Narcotics Squad 15. Ogg today saying, quote, there may be more to this story.
Yeah, there's a huge amount more. So let's take a look at what the FBI released on the charges these guys are facing. So this is from Department of Justice, Office of Public Affairs, and here's their press release. The former Houston police officers indicted on connection with the fatal raid. They're calling fatal raid because 2 innocent people were killed, and they're not even mentioning the people's dog. They killed their dog, and then they shot the husband, and the woman picked up the gun trying to defend her husband because she thought it was a freaking raid because the cops weren't even in uniform when they did a no-knock. I mean, there was just so many errors in here. And if you saw the media when this came out, the cops were played as the victims, and oh, the poor police are doing such a dangerous job out there. They're getting shot and they're trying to protect you. Meanwhile, they're lying. They're falsifying search warrants. I mean, it's just crazy. So let's see. They say 3 people now in custody on the raid. a federal grand jury returned 9 indictments against Goines, who is 55 and he's retired, Bryant, who's 46. They're both Houston. I think they both retired. And also Patricia Ann. Patricia Ann is the one that called supposedly multiple times saying that the place was a drug house and they had automatic weapons. And I think, just by reading this little press release here, I think she's going to end up saying, my daughter was going there and I was only reporting what my daughter told me. So I don't know if they're going to get a conviction on her. The only way they're going to get a conviction on her is if she knew that she didn't like these people and she was just making up shit. If she admitted that she made this up, then she's probably going to get convicted. But if she said, well, my daughter was going to the house and my daughter told me this and I was just repeating and reporting for the safety of the community and myself and the worried for my daughter on what my daughter was telling me, then they're probably not going to convict her. Let's see. The indictment was unsealed. I wish I could get a copy of the unsealed indictment, but I haven't been able to find it. Maybe somebody will post it in the comments. They're expected to make the initial appearance for a magistrate. The federal indictment stems from a 28 drug raid. Okay, Goines is charged with 2 counts of depriving their victims of constitutional rights to be secure against unreasonable searches. Man, I think you could charge every cop every day that does these unlawful traffic stops and unlawful detentions on people carrying guns. They are depriving these people that they stop of their constitutional rights. Why aren't these charges being filed? Because there's no outrage, and the media and the cops are our friends and they're all heroes, and you know, the fire departments are blocking highways and that's very dangerous and they should get more money, and you know, because it's a dangerous job to fight fires that they never fight, but they stay on the highway a lot. Anyway, I digress. The indictment alleges that Goines and numerous material facts. You notice they said material false facts. If he lied about the weather and it doesn't get somebody killed, then it's not a big deal. That's the difference between a material fact and a non-material fact. He lied about material facts. Material facts meaning somebody bought dope there. The person that bought dope there said he saw a gun. First of all, nobody bought dope. Second of all, he couldn't have said he saw a gun when he bought dope if he didn't buy dope. Those are material facts and statements. So material statements in the search warrant obtained for the residence, the execution of warrants contain false statements resulting in the death of 2 individuals as well as injuries of 4 persons. So they're charging him with not only the deaths of the 2 people, but for the 4 cops that got shot. Now, I'm not sure they can charge Goines because he got shot. I could be wrong. If there's a lawyer out there, I'm kind of thinking, if I did something that got me shot, you can't use me as a victim to charge me because I got myself shot. So you're going to charge me with lying to get myself shot. I could be wrong, but that just doesn't seem it'll pass the reasonable test. But Goines was one of the 4 officers that got shot. Okay, Goines and Bryant are charged with obstruction of justice and falsifying documents. Goines allegedly made false statements of his tactical plan and offense prepared in connection with the search warrant. The indictment alleges Bryant falsely claimed in a supplemental report that he had previously assisted Goines in a Hardy investigation. Now, if Bryant said in his supplemental, I didn't see his full supplemental, if he said that me and Goines prepped the informant and we searched him to make sure he didn't have drugs before he went in, and we gave him money that we had photocopied and we had all the serial numbers, and when he came out, he didn't have the money, and when he came out, he had dope that he didn't have when he went in, and we tested the dope. If Goines and Bryant said all that together, then they're both culpable. But if Bryant just said, hey, Goines showed me dope, and he said it came from this house, and I believed him, I don't think Bryant is culpable in a criminal thing, but we'll see. Bryant allegedly identified a brown powdery substance he retrieved from Goines' vehicle as narcotics purchased in Harding. Well, he could have done that as a mistake of fact. He's just going by what Goines told him. It all depends on whether they can prove a conspiracy between Goines and Bryant to hide the truth. And Goines did tell Bryant to go get the dope out of his car. So they did talk. Now, if they can prove that they conspired to make that dope in his car to say they bought it from there, then they got him. But again, there's a lot of facts unknown. Goines obstruction purchase. Goines' father's charged with 3 separate counts of obstructing an official proceeding. The federal grand jury alleges that Goines falsely stated that a particular confidential informant had purchased narcotics 3 days prior. He also falsely stated that a different confidential informant purchased narcotics at the residence on that day, according to the charges. And on 13, he also falsely said that the purchase of narcotics at the residence on that day, the indictment alleges none of these statements were true. Okay, yeah, we get that. Let's see, this is the end of the press conference. The charges against Garcia, this is the woman that called in, alleges that she conveyed false information by making several fake 911 calls. Now, the grand jury had to know they were fake 911 calls to put this out. Specifically, on January 8th, she allegedly made several calls claiming her daughter was inside the Harding Street location. According to the indictment, Garcia added that the residents of the homes were addicts, drug dealers, and they had guns, including machine guns. So by her saying that they have machine guns, this kind of bumps it up to a more federal crime. Not only are they engaged in selling drugs, they're armed with illegal guns that they shouldn't have. So if any of the warrant was based, which it probably was, I didn't see it. When I reviewed the warrant, I did not see anything about 911 calls being justification for the warrant. It was all based on the confidential informant. But if any of the information was based on these phone calls that the police believe were true, and then they made entry and killed these people, she could technically be charged with the murder of those people. But it sounds like they're not. They're just charging her with an obstruction. Charges of false information. If convicted of the civil rights charges, Goines faces life in prison. Each obstruction count carries a potential 20-year sentence, while Garcia faces a 5-year term imprisonment for conveying false information. So calling 911 and lying can get you 5 years in prison. The FBI conducted the investigation. Okay, so that's what the FBI said. This is still an ongoing investigation. As more information comes out, I'll put it out. I think this is a really interesting case from a cop perspective. I've done so many warrants. I know how serious it is to lie in a warrant. You take an oath. You don't play with warrants. You put a lot of people in jeopardy. You put cops in jeopardy. You put citizens in jeopardy. You lie to the courts. You falsify under oath. I mean, there's just so many things when you play with a search warrant that's just personally offensive to me. I've done so many, and I've taken every one of them seriously. So that's why I'm covering this case. I will put this on the playlist for the Houston Police Department. So if you click on my playlist, it'll be Houston Police, and all these cases are connected. All right, we'll end that there.